Mr. Forgetful by Roger Hargreaves. It is one of those beautiful summer mornings that everybody likes to see. In Forget-Me-Not Cottage, the owner was fast asleep. Mr. Forgetful, he was having a dream. Then the sun, streaming through the windows, woke up Mr. Forgetful. He yawned, stretched his arms, and tried to remember what he'd been dreaming about. But of course he couldn't, because Mr. Forgetful couldn't remember anything. Anything at all. Ever. Mr. Forgetful got out of bed and went to wash his face. But he'd forgotten where the bathroom was in his house. And, do you know what he did? He walked into the wardrobe. Oops, silly old me. He giggled to himself. Eventually, of course, Mr. Forgetful found his bathroom and washed his face. He even remembered to clean his teeth. Then he went downstairs to make himself some breakfast. He toasted some bread, but of course he forgot about it, and it was burnt. He boiled himself an egg, but of course he forgot about it and it was hard-boiled. Mr. Forgetful has burnt toast and hard-boiled eggs for breakfast every day. It was such a lovely day that Mr. Forgetful decided to walk down to the village to buy a stamp for a letter he'd written 3 weeks ago but had forgotten to post. So off he set. And did he remember to shut the door of Forget-Me-Not Cottage behind him? Of course he didn't.
Good morning, Mr. Forgetful,
said Mrs. Parcel in the village post office.
What can I do for you this fine morning?
I'd like I've forgotten, he said.
A stamp?
Suggested Mrs. Parcel, looking at the letter Mr. Forgetful was carrying. Yes, a stamp. That's what it is. That's what I was trying to remember not to forget, said Mr. Forgetful. Mrs. Parcel smiled. She was used to Mr. Forgetful. Mr. Forgetful had some more shopping to do, but could he remember what it was he was supposed to remember not to forget to shop for? Of course he didn't. So he decided to go home. On his way, he met the village policeman going the other way. Morning, Mr. Forgetful, said the policeman. Will you give Farmer Fields a message from me on your way home, please? Farmer Fields had a farm not very far from Forget-Me-Not Cottage. Tell him that there is a sheep loose in the lane, said the policeman. Poor Mr. Forgetful. He never had a message to remember in his life before. There's a sheep loose in the lane, he said to himself, trying to remember the message as he hurried along. There's a sheep loose in the lane. 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 Mr. Forgetful repeated the message over and over to himself. There's a sheep loose in the lane. And eventually, he arrived at the farm and found Farmer Fields. Mr. Fields, he said, there's a goose asleep in the rain. Farmer Fields couldn't believe his ears. A goose asleep in the rain? Repeated Farmer Fields slowly. But I don't have any geese. And anyway, it isn't raining. You sure that was the message? Poor Mr. Forgetful. He got it all wrong. And he couldn't remember how to get it all right. He simply couldn't remember at all. So off he went home. Poor Mr. Forgetful. Mr. Forgetful walked away from Farmer Fields' farm, feeling very sorry for himself. Oh, I do wish I could remember things, he thought. He was so busy feeling very sorry for himself that he didn't see that there was a sheep loose in the lane, and he bumped into it and fell over. Bother, said Mr. Forgetful. Brrr, said the sheep. How silly letting a sheep loose in the lane, thought Mr. Forgetful. And then he remembered the message. He jumped up and ran back along the lane to the farm as fast as he could. Mr. Fields! Mr. Fields! He called as he ran to the farmhouse. Mr. Fields! There's a goose asleep in the rain. He'd forgotten again. And Mr. Fields just scratched his head. Come with me! Come on!" cried Mr. Forgetful, and pulled Farmer Fields back along the lane until they came to the sheep that was loose. "There it is!" cried Mr. Forgetful, pointing. "It's a goose!" And then he stopped. "Oh dear," he said. "That's not a goose, is it? That's a sheep." And he blushed. "I think," smiled Farmer Fields, "that you're the goose." And he chuckled. And Mr. Forgetful giggled. And Farmer Fields laughed. And even the sheep started to laugh. It was so funny. Later that day, Mr. Forgetful sat down in his favourite armchair in Forget-Me-Not Cottage to think about what a funny day it had been. But you know something? He tried and tried, but try as he would, he simply couldn't remember anything that happened. Especially that time about the goose asleep on the goose asleep on the train. Oh dear, he'd forgotten again. Oh, Mr. Forgetful.
This is the story of Mr. Forgetful, who cannot remember a thing that he's done. He lives in a house called Forget-Me-Not Cottage, but when he first lived there, he cannot recall. He goes to the kitchen instead of the bathroom, 'cause he can't remember where anything is. He really can't help it, he is so forgetful that Mr. Forgetful he cannot recall.
Mr. Forgetful, he just can't remember the things that he said or the things that he's done. He cannot remember when he last remembered, remembering things that he said or he's done.
He goes for a walk and forgets how to get there. He gets there and wonders just where he has been. He doesn't remember just why he is going, or how he came to be going at all. That is the story of Mr. Forgetful, who cannot remember a thing that he's done. He doesn't remember quite where he is going, or whether he ought to be going at all.
Mr. Forgetful, he just can't remember the things that he said or the things that he's done. He cannot remember when he last remembered, remembering things that he said or he's done. Mr. Forgetful, he just can't remember the things that he said or the things that he's done. He cannot remember when he last remembered, remembering things that he said or he's done. Mr. Forgetful, he just can't remember the things that he said or the things that he's done. He cannot remember when he last remembered,